The story goes like this. On the 2nd of June 1917, Canadian pilot Billy Bishop climbed into his aircraft for a dawn raid on an enemy airfield. A few hours later, he would return, having shot down 4 enemy aircraft, an action that would win him the Victoria Cross. He would go on to become the highest-scoring British Empire ace of the war, with 72 victories. A national celebrity. A wartime hero. But this is where things get a bit awkward, because he might have just lied about the whole thing. Did he really perform the action for which he was awarded Britain's highest military honour? What happens when the people we describe as heroes turn out to be not quite so heroic? This is a citation for Bishop's Victoria Cross. Captain Bishop, who had been sent out to work independently, flew first of all to an enemy aerodrome. Finding no machine about, he flew on to another aerodrome about 3 miles southeast. 7 machines, some with their engines running, were on the ground. He attacked these from about 50 feet, and a mechanic, who was starting one of the engines, was seen to fall. One of the machines got off the ground, but at a height of 60 feet, Captain Bishop fired 15 rounds into it at a very close range, and it crashed to the ground. A second machine got off the ground, into which he fired 30 rounds at 150 yards range, and it fell into a tree. 2 more machines then rose from the aerodrome. One of these he engaged at the height of 1,000 feet, emptying the rest of his drum of ammunition. This machine crashed 300 yards from the aerodrome, after which Captain Bishop emptied a whole drum into the 4th hostile machine and then flew back to his station. This is certainly an impressive report. I'm not trying to put Bishop on trial here, but it is worth examining some of the doubts raised about this version of events. William Fry served with Bishop and recalled a previous incident in May 1917, which highlights Bishop's character. A German aircraft had been spotted taking photos of ground troops. Fry and Bishop were sent to tackle it.
On getting up to the trench lines, we saw at once the German machine, straight in front and slightly higher than we were. It turned away as we approached, and we both let fly at it from long range, too far away to have any chance of hitting him. Having driven him off, we turned for home. On landing, Bishop came up to me and, to my surprise, said, "We got him all right. Did you see him go down and crash?" Or something like that. Now, I had not seen a German machine go down. The one which I had taken to be the one we were attacking, and at which I had fired a burst at very long range, had turned back deep into the German lines. But such was Bishop's reputation in the squadron that I thought he must have attacked and brought down another, closer machine, which I had not seen. I was certainly not going to contradict him. I was young and unsure of myself, feeling very much on trial under new management, and was not going to jeopardise my place in the squadron.
This doesn't prove anything, but it is a first-hand account of Bishop mistakenly claiming a victory and trying to get his junior to corroborate it. Someone's past actions doesn't dictate their future, but it can be a good indication of it. Aged 17, Bishop entered the Royal Military College of Canada. Perhaps as a result of placing 42nd out of 43 candidates, he resorted to cheating in his end-of-year exams. He was caught and narrowly avoided expulsion. Again, not wanting to be too harsh on Bishop, but you can't help but notice a pattern of behaviour here. Fry expressed his doubts about the 2nd of June VC action.
That night, I began to wonder about a group of bullet holes in the elevator part of the tail of Bishop's machine, which were supposed to have been made by machine gun fire from pursuing German scouts. This group of 4 or 5 bullet holes was within a circle of about 5 inches diameter, and, what is more, the edge of each bullet hole was circled with the black mark of cordite from the gun which had fired it.
Cordite is the material inside a cartridge. It's what propels the bullet forwards, and so it's extremely unusual to find it on bullet holes if they were supposed to have been fired from a moving aircraft some distance away.
I came to the conclusion that the burst could only have been made by someone holding a machine gun on the ground and from a distance of a yard or two. No hostile aircraft could have got near enough to fire such a group, much less for the bullets to leave cordite marks.
The accusation that Fry makes is that Bishop himself fired those bullets. Now, the obvious way of investigating this claim is to examine Bishop's machine gun, except that it had rather conveniently been left behind when he returned to base. This, he later explained, was to make the aircraft lighter as it was running out of fuel, but it does strike me as being rather suspicious. Dan McCaffrey, in his biography of Bishop, points out that the Ace had taken off at 3:57 a.m. and had returned at 5:40 a.m. after a high-speed chase at low levels. Under such conditions, a Newport would have exhausted its fuel. Billy had an explanation. He told Willie Fry that he had become lost and landed behind Allied lines in the French Army sector to ask field hands for directions. Neither in his combat report nor in his autobiography did he mention that he had been on the ground before returning to base or that he had returned without his gun. There are no German records which corroborate Bishop's version of events. Granted, many of these records were destroyed in the Second World War, and this has often been used in Bishop's defence, but unfortunately, the ones relevant to this action do actually survive. As Brereton Greenhouse writes, among them was the weekly activity report of the 2nd Army Air Commander, Kommandeur der Flieger Army 2, for the week in question, being the man over whose sector of the Western Front Bishop claimed to have flown that day. His report for the week ending 6th of June goes into considerable detail about enemy air activity, but not a word does it have to say about a daylight attack on any of his airfields. Yet it would have been very important that all his subordinates and fellow Army Air Commanders be made aware of such a raid had it occurred. The version of events which Fry puts forward is that Bishop set off that morning, landed somewhere quiet, took his machine gun, fired into his own aircraft, discarded the gun, and then returned to base with a thrilling, if fictional, story. When the RAF Museum released a first-day cover for a stamp celebrating the 60th anniversary of the attack, 3 of the 4 surviving servicemen from the time declined to sign it. Ultimately, there's no way of knowing what really happened. Did Bishop really lie about the event that won him the Victoria Cross? We don't know. Personally, I think he did. But this video isn't really about whether he lied or not. Because to properly understand Bishop, we need to examine the wider culture of First World War aviation as a whole. In the First World War, those who took to the air were seen as different. Even today, fighter pilots are seen as chivalrous knights of the air. In October 1917, just a few months after Bishop's action, Prime Minister David Lloyd George said this in Parliament. The airmen are the knighthood of this war. They recall the old legends of chivalry, not merely by the daring of their exploits, but by the nobility of their spirit, and amongst the multitudes of heroes, let us think of the chivalry of the air. Steve Lukitz, in his book on Bishop, summarises the popular image of the fighter pilot which endures today. In 1917, the fighter pilot captured the public imagination with the airplane, the most advanced technology of the time, and the timeless image of the warrior engaged in single combat like the chivalric knight of romance, and so unlike the thousands in their anonymous muddy khaki. So you have thousands of young men viewed by the public as superior to the ordinary soldier, noble, dashing, whose thrilling exploits are devoured by the press to boost morale. It's not surprising that some would enjoy this kind of attention. The fact is, even if Billy Bishop lied, overclaiming was a problem in every air force. As Peter Hart writes, it seems that some pilots claimed only when they were certain and were occasionally wrong. Many pilots claimed in good faith and were often wrong. Others claimed in what can euphemistically be called an optimistic frame of mind. A few, a very few, were utterly fraudulent. But all of them, one way or another, overclaimed. So you have a totally new method of fighting and an individual hierarchy of who is the best fighter. There's no proper protocol for verifying anyone's claims, so you pretty much have to take them on good faith. Combat is chaotic and confusing in the best of times, but especially in the air, when you only have a couple of seconds to see something. This is the perfect recipe for anarchy, where honest pilots can be mistaken about who they shot down, and dishonest prima donnas can get away with stretching the truth. Things became especially tricky because Bishop was so admired at home and on the front lines. When he returned to Canada on leave in September 1917, he was given a hero's welcome. The Toronto Globe enthused that "this knight from the clouds was fresh from his triumphs, and his cheeks are still bronzed from voyaging through lucent solitudes." With the country sick of 3 years of endless war, who could resist such a good story? Who would want to publicly cast doubt on someone who'd contributed so much to the Allied war effort? We've already seen in Fry's first testimony the fear he felt at sharing his concerns about Bishop's claimed victory. This is a fear that all whistleblowers face when confronting someone who is popular or powerful. When Fry did express his doubts, it went about as well as you'd expect.
Within a few days, I was sent back to England as needing a rest, and my recommendation for promotion to flight commander was cancelled. And I see from the records, released within the last few years, that an adverse report followed me, despite most fulsome recommendations having been made on my behalf a week or two previously. Such a rapid volte-face that it appears very difficult to be explained, except that the CO may have become alarmed at the spread of rising disbelief in the squadron that Bishop's claims were untrue.
I acknowledge that I'm placing a lot of faith in Fry's testimony, and I accept the possibility that, for his own reasons, he might be an unreliable narrator painting a false impression of Bishop and the internal squadron politics. But the general principle is that, at the time, Bishop, and more importantly, his story, was seen as more important than the truth. Everybody knew that it was made up. It became common knowledge. But it couldn't be proclaimed at the time because the Canadians were so proud of him that it would have been damaging to Allied unity. The story of Billy Bishop is so controversial because he is a national hero. There's no denying that. Even if he did lie about his action, he still served his country faithfully and bravely and should be commended for that. But that doesn't make him immune to criticism either. When doubts about his Victoria Cross were first made public, it caused such a scandal that in 1985 a Canadian Senate inquiry was launched to investigate the claims. So, what do we take away from the story of Billy Bishop? I think the reason that his story is so controversial is because of the way we've constructed our ideas about First World War pilots. To us, pilots were the chivalrous knights of the air. They'd escaped the anonymity of trench warfare to have thrilling one-on-one combat in the air. They achieved a level of individual ranked hierarchy of recognition which the ordinary soldier could only dream of. Hence, when we suggest that some pilots may have been dishonest, it feels like an attack on our memory of all pilots. The films Aces High and The Blue Max are probably two of the best depictions of First World War aerial combat, demythologizing a lot of what was essentially wartime propaganda. Billy Bishop, in a way, gets a lot of bad rep. He has the most famous scandal when it comes to overclaiming, but this was a problem in every air force. Most pilots were honest, but the conditions at the time meant that honest pilots could be mistaken about who they shot down, and dishonest pilots could artificially inflate their kill count. Perhaps Billy Bishop is a scapegoat for our unwillingness to confront the fact that we can't really trust any individual's record of victories. Maybe, to properly understand Bishop, we need to reevaluate our understanding of First World War pilots as a whole.
say goodbye, Dolly Gray. It's no use to ask me why.